Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We have just had an exciting little fun preview on Zoom, and now we are inviting our audiences on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram to our Chuck Jones Creativeside Chat of the season. The making of the Grinch wasn't exactly a cinch. I'm beyond excited because I love animation, but I love the production of animation. And tonight, what we're going to experience over the course of our evening is some incredible behind-the-scenes artwork that's never been seen before, including by Craig, who didn't realize what was in the boxes. We also have some interesting stories and behind the scenes because this film almost wasn't made. And the lengths that Chuck and his team, along with Dr. Seuss, had to go to just to produce this film. And then getting into some amazing artwork, never before seen items, and how we have what we have left of the production of this film, as well as some very exciting gifts that you can purchase as well from the Grinch, and how all that gets packaged together. So as we kick this off tonight, and I have no idea, my kids ran off, I think, with my Santa hat, so there'll be a nice glare from the light on my shiny head. I would like to bring in...
You got your Santa hat on your chest. That's good.
I'll send one of my children out. They'll find it. It's around here somewhere. So without, of course, further ado, we bring in Sir Craig Kausen, Chuck's grandson, and the purveyor of all things awesome. Craig, welcome yet again to an exciting Chuck Jones Creativeside Chat.
Oh, thank you. I will say this is the first one we did back in April, which was just you and me trying to figure out something to do during a global pandemic. And who would have thunk that so many months later we'd still be in a global pandemic? But you know what? If we can put a smile on, well, my face, your face, and maybe a few other faces, then we're doing our part to make our way through this thing together. So it's exciting. Somebody said, maybe it was you. I mean, maybe like 6 or 8 weeks ago. Oh yeah, December's got to be the Grinch, or maybe it was even like summertime, and then it was like, well, what is that going to look like? And then people were throwing out ideas, and as it all came together, and we were able to kind of find things and put things together. And I'm just, as I had mentioned to you, sort of pre-show, there are things in these boxes that I've never seen before, because I know when I was just opening them up, there were things that I'd never seen before, and I didn't look below them. So there's going to be a little random things, and hopefully there won't be anything too strange in these boxes. But they're all supposed to be Grinch. Let's put it that way.
Well, I visiting out when we were visiting and flying out to go see stuff over the years, and getting to go to the kind of archives in the back and just pulling out drawings of things. And you know how I nerd out on that kind of stuff. I've collected some of Chuck's original drawings and inks, and I find the production of this to be absolutely fascinating. And this film is legendary, right? And to get how it even comes to be in this, where you take a book that reads 12 minutes, you've got to turn it into a 24-minute special for television, and how Chuck transition from Warner Brothers into his own production studio to do all these films that he did afterwards, and to bring that legendary crew with him to make this happen. I want to start, with a little history on Chuck and Dr. Seuss's relationship, how that all started, because I think it's hilarious. And when you bring up Private Snafu, did you know Snafu stands for something?
Well, there it is.
It does.
I didn't know it was fouled.
It is. It was. Yeah. I'll get to that in the Private Snafu of situation normally all blanked up, right?
There you go.
There you go. So getting into that, these two legends that come together, and how did that happen? Like, where did they meet? Where did this all start, Craig?
So as you said, there was. Ted was already working with the Army Corps to produce training materials, and then the concept of doing training films came up. And Chuck used to say that the reason that they decided on animation is because if they tried to film actors acting in these training films on things like you saw there, on malaria training and camouflage training and spy training and all that kind of stuff, that that the servicemen would say, well, that's ridiculous. They're actors, and if you try to put servicemen in there, they're just not good actors. So they just laugh at them as well. So instead, they figured out that animation is the perfect portal because it keeps it, especially if you make it amusing. There is a little known fact that when you make someone laugh, it lightens their brain and they can learn faster. So it is scientifically proven. And they were doing this 80 years ago, in the 1940s. So they got together. Warner Brothers got the contract to do the Private Snafu films, and Chuck was chosen to lead that production. And so, in the midst of the other things, and if you look at the numbers of films that he did in the 40s, they certainly came down from the 8 to 12 that he was doing normally during the years. And it's because he was working on this during that time, and all production really slowed down at the time. But he got to know Dr. Seuss, Ted Geisel, very well, and this is pre-Dr. Seuss. I mean, this is in the 40s, and they were working with Colonel Frank Capra, who was in this production as well, as far as this. And Maurice Noble was there. That's sort of how Maurice and Chuck met. So it really is the basis of so many things that then went on as after the war, that these relationships continued. So I'm looking at these private snafus. Yes, I mean, you got to figure that you're a service person, in the midst of the war, that as you have to get trained not to fall for someone's trick, a woman, or taking secrets from you. Watching a guy in a cartoon would probably be a great way to get the facts and pay attention. So that's how it started.
And I find it fascinating too that he was Captain Theodore Geisel, and then by the time he exited, he was Major Theodore Geisel, which I had no idea. I always thought of him about as Dr. Seuss. So that was pretty awesome. And then you get into, after they done with films in the war, and the two of them had worked together, they do their thing. Seuss had kind of a dissatisfaction with Hollywood. I was kind of shocked to learn that he was paid $50 from Leon Schlesinger for the Horton Hears a Who.
Well, the previous version that it was going to be, it was he had not, and you know what, he didn't really want his books done. That was the whole thing, is they were books, and he loved them as books. And if you really read Dr. Seuss's books, the brilliance and the wisdom and the communication of so many messages come through them. And so the way that he envisioned them, he saw them, he drew them, and the way he wrote them was perfect. And so even to open up the idea of having somebody else involved was a huge step. And he wasn't really into commercial anything. So that all of a sudden it was going to become a film was kind of like, it sounds like a commercial thing. So yeah, it took some convincing.
Oh, so Horton hatches the egg. Thank you, Guillermo. 1942, and I know is after learning, even seeing some of Dr. Seuss's secret art and his kind of just quest for not, I don't want this out while I'm here kind of deal. And thankfully I have two of those pieces. And he publishes the Grinch, How the Grinch Stole Christmas in 1957. And Chuck, that beginning of Chuck making those trips up the mountain top, as he puts it, in La Jolla to visit Dr. Seuss, how much convincing did that take?
Well, it was I mean, obviously they'd known each other, they'd stayed in touch. I can't believe that he actually paid him $50 for the story. Chuck $50 at that point, in the early 1940s. Leon was the cheapest wealthy man that Chuck ever knew, that pretty much anybody ever knew. But that's a whole separate story. But when Chuck left Warner Brothers and they were really shutting down the studio in the early 60s, he went off to MGM. He was doing his own production, but then went to MGM, did all these things, and was looking for projects to do for television, because Warner Brothers, the theatrical short was done. he was offered a lot of opportunity to do things inexpensively, like others had left the major studios of short subjects to go do. But he was always looking for something. He just won the Academy Award for Dot in the Line. But during this time, he was really intrigued by Dr. Seuss's books. I mean, Cat in the Hat, all of these different stories. But he really saw the opportunity with How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And when Chuck got an idea, it festered. And I think usually his creative process was not a long one as far as when he envisioned something. So he did go down 3 times to ask Ted, and because he was living in LA and Hollywood, and so he traveled down to La Jolla and talked to him about it. And most people say, well, Chuck Jones goes and sees Dr. Seuss, and they've known each other for years, and makes a pitch of an idea that, of course, what's the answer? No. And then, of course, he goes back and fleshes it out some more, and goes back again, and he gets another no. And then finally he puts together enough, and he talks to Ted about what it's going to mean as far as a half-an-hour television special, what he envisions it's going to be, what it's going to mean to the world, and his book, the characters, the respect, all of that. And Ted finally relented, and he said, Chuck, because it's you, I will say yes. And so it was that process just to get it to that point. And, at MGM. And that was number one. Before anything else happened, you've got to get the rights to the book. So that was the first step.
So you mentioned MGM and Roger Mayer and how all this stuff comes together. And it's one thing to go pitch an idea and to get those rights to the book, and you've got Dr. Seuss on board, and then you got to put a budget together. And if memory serves, budgets on animated shorts were roughly, especially for television, were in the 25,000-ish, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and that was the that was the going rate for a half an hour of television animation at that time, and that was actually higher than it was even a couple of years before that for television animation. And so they were running 20 to 25,000 per episode. And so, yeah, but Chuck didn't want to do something low budget. He had been offered a lot of money to do something like Hanna-Barbera had done. And Chuck went on, as many of you know, to do Tom and Jerry's, asked permission from Hanna-Barbera to do Tom and Jerry's for MGM when he first came on to MGM. And they absolutely said yes, because, for you, Chuck, quality animation, let's continue that. Those were 6-minute shorts. But yeah, he put together the team, which included many of the people from Warner Brothers. So it wasn't going to happen for $25,000.
And what was the actual price tag?
I wish I could put my hands on it. I did come across it, and the original budget was $362,000. And so if you think about that in relation, so it's really 24 minutes of animation with plus credits and all the rest of the stuff, that this was over 10 times more than what television specials were going for at the time. And so, Roger said, I don't know if he really laughed, but I know that if I were in his position and Chuck came in with that kind of budget, because they didn't have that kind of budget for Dot in the Line, the 10-minute piece of animation. They had a hefty budget that won the Academy Award. But I do believe that there was something about winning the Academy Award, bringing all this acclaim to MGM, and Chuck's first Academy Award that he actually got to go accept. And there was a lot of momentum there. And so there was the discussion that, Chuck, that it never going to happen for that kind of price tag. And Roger Mayer, who was, of the MGMs, of the Metro-Goldwyn and Mayer, he was the next generation, and he was working on the project with Chuck as an executive, and said, this is just not going to happen. And Chuck said, don't worry about it. I'll find the money. I'll just,
well, so speaking of, like, you got to go find the money, and animation is a visual business, right? So you're not going in with a script, you're going with storyboards. And an average, 6-minute film, theatrical short is about 150 storyboards or so. You're expanding this times 4, so you're looking at around 600-ish storyboards, and the director kind of does all of those for the most part.
pretty much all of them. And Maurice Noble did a few, and certainly can be seen in his style. But I see Scott is putting some of the storyboards that we have been able to have imagery of. There you go. So you can kind of see and this is on MGM storyboard, and so that's a Chuck drawing and colorized, and his writing down below, and having the story done and having Chuck envision it all. This whole process, as it's being fleshed out, you really have to communicate what the end result is going to look like, because someone even considering, let alone putting in $25,000 at that time, and this is the mid 1960s, when I think my dad was a chemical engineer out of Caltech making $6,000 a year. So why I remember that, I have no idea. But the idea of something on the order of $360,000 to be able to produce this 30-minute television special was unfathomable. And so the normal people that he pitched to, whether it be the cereal companies or the normal ones, that would do a family television special, weren't interested at that price point. They just couldn't get there, because if somebody came in and said, look, you get such and such for $10,000 and you're used to paying $500 for it, you're going to go, yeah, what? No, I mean, I already got this for that, so I know it's not going to go. So Chuck went around and made pitches with these storyboards. And as I'm going through, I get to share a storyboard that I actually have in my possession. It's not mine, but it's here with me. Let me see if I can do that. But you can see the storyboard there, and you can see the final cell that went from that moment and what the vision was. Chuck did not vary from that very much. And so, the idea that to go out, and Chuck was a storyteller. I mean, that's the thing about all of those that didn't know Chuck, that when you got around him, you listened, and he was engaging. He wasn't overly, effusive. He wasn't that funny guy like a Robin Williams sort of thing, but he told great stories, and he knew how to pick exactly the right words to tell the story. And so for him to go out and make 25 pitches on this, and he went coast to coast. He went from the West Coast to New York. He traveled across the country and made pitches on this. And imagine taking these storyboards plus the budget and saying, here is who is going to be involved. Here is what it's going to be. It's a Dr. Seuss, going to be classic. And remember, this is only, 5 or 6, 7 years after he wrote the book that he really started creating this traction for it. So the idea of going out and making these pitches, and he got 25 no's. And finally, he ends up in your neck of the woods, Ben, in Chicago at the Association of Community Banks, which he always thought was very interesting, that the whole message of the Grinch was that it comes without boxes and bells, and it comes without presents, and it comes without all these things that are got in the stores. And now it's being funded by the Association of Community Banks. And so he always thought that was an interesting view. But they said, you know what, we see what you're going to do. And turns out they were the smartest guys in the room. And so they decided to fund the project and make it go with all of the things, because people wanted to cut out the top level animators, the voices, the right music, the right everything that went into it, because it would lower the budget, and Chuck wasn't willing to do it.
Well, they kept true to their dream. They wanted quality. It was only going to work if it was quality. And you had mentioned like 26 times. It finally hits on the 26th. And Chuck was the one going out and pitching all of this and did all the acting, he went through every board and 26 times did the whole dog and pony show,
Yeah.
which to show you, like, right, put the work in, and look what happens. So they get the financing. The National Association of Commercial Banks gets it all done. They're able to now produce this thing. Okay, great. Now the next hurdle, right? So you've got your team, and really what you just mentioned, I think, is very poignant for this, where we're going into next, which is the team that was involved in this. And he wanted to keep the quality in there. He did keep the quality in there. We obviously see that in the final product. But the guys that he really trusted around him to do amazing things, and he had a co-director in Ben Washam, and he had his core guys in animation. And how did, were there any stories? And you hear of other film studios, and they have a director, it's very successful, then they bring in a co-director, and that's kind of your learning experience. Was there a learning experience there between Ben Washam and Chuck Jones in the making of this?
Well, think about, and Chuck cultivated his team, and the one that I spoke to most about that one was Maurice Noble before he passed away, and the other is Phil Roman, who is turning 90 in a couple of weeks, and he was the youngster on the project, and so the idea of Chuck cultivating a team, and this team started way back when. I mean, this was, if you look at the credits, and I'm trying to remember them all, that, and I love to envision, Chuck starting to direct at 24 years old on Night Watchman in 1938, started directing in 1937, and Ben Washam and Ken Harris were already animating with him on his first film. They came into the studio a couple of years after Chuck did, but they started on his first film, and when he saw talent, he sought them out, he pulled them near, and he kept them close. And the thing about the stories that I heard from like Oral Thompson and others that I got to know over those years, over the last 20 some years before, Chuck passed away, that he kept people close to him, his team, for the most part, the animators, some with Maurice, but particularly the animators and others, they got together almost every weekend to hang out, and they partied together, they played together, sometimes they went out on vacations together. So this was Unit A, is what there were 3 units at any given time, and his happened to be called Unit A. And so they, 1937, 1938, and most of them stayed together throughout this entire time. Occasionally they would maybe go off and do things in the early 60s and whatnot. Maurice came in during the private snafu, but then came in the late 1940s, early 1950s to start working with Chuck as a layout designer. And so, each of them had their history with Chuck. Mike Maltese was a writer for all that time, but obviously with what was going on at MGM with Dr. Seuss and now Norton Juster with the Dot and the Line, he'd already gone off. Mike had already gone off and started to work elsewhere. So these guys had 30 years working together already, and Chuck had over 200 films at Warner Brothers. And so these guys were a well-oiled machine. And that these were when Ken Harris went off to do A Christmas Carol in 1971, I believe, with Richard Williams, he was the only one that was given the credits master animator. There were a lot of animators that worked on that film, but he was the only one. And that was they were the legends that had continued. If you got into Chuck Jones' unit, and Phil Roman was one to talk about it, that if you got into Chuck Jones' unit, you had made it. And so, one thing of that, because Phil actually was given the opportunity to go direct after he left Disney. And
there were a lot of animators that worked on that film, but he was the only one. And that was they were the legends that had continued. If you got into Chuck Jones,
that was interesting.
That was interesting.
All of a sudden, I'm like, who's talking?
But I'm talking to myself, with myself.
In a really nice conversation with myself. But anyway, I'll continue. That basically, he was given the opportunity to direct, and he said no when he got the opportunity. He asked, I believe it was Ben Washam, if there was an opportunity over at Chuck's unit and over at MGM, and there was. And so he got in there, and he may have even started at Warner Brothers. But he started up as an assistant animator on the Grinch. He became an animator, a full animator. And he said it was his transition. Chuck took note of how good a job he was doing and promoted him to full animator during that process. So yeah, there was, if you look at the history of each of the people that were involved in this, it was the dream team, and it was well worth paying for, as far as, he knew that like Maurice Noble needed to do this. He was co-director of Dot on the Line, and they had won the Academy Award. And Maurice had worked on Fantasia and Sleep and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, so he was legendary back when. And that's the way I remember Maurice. He was probably, other than Chuck, Oral, and June, he was the one that I spent the most time with. He was such a character, and he was a legend in his own way, that battled for what he believed in. He was the one, although Chuck came up with the Grinch being green, as he says in his book, because of the cars that he always rented it were green. But I think it made a lot of sense, because the book was black and white, that it needed to, obviously had to have color, and all of a sudden there's this green. But it was Maurice that came up with the right green, and he understood. I remember talking to him in the 90s about he said, the first greens that he used were too green. Which is, I didn't even know you could be too green. But the idea that he had to then mix in a lot of yellow in there, so that not only would it look the way he wanted to in the paint, he understood that with television, the colors were going to shift, even on the color televisions back then. And we didn't have a color TV back then, but we had a black and white. But the idea of knowing how that transition was going to happen, it's that perfect sort of pea soup green that makes it so muddy and perfect for the mood. And that was all Maurice Noble.
Well, and Maurice I love his book, The Noble Approach. It's fantastic. Chuck writes the forward in it, and his whole approach to design is absolutely stunning in what he pulls off. And I think, this is obviously one of those masterpieces that Maurice worked on, and you can see, reading his philosophy on design and how he thinks about things, where he doesn't want the backgrounds to overtake the main action going on, but bring that aesthetic and,
Yeah.
Maurice is one of those guys I wish I would have had the pleasure to meet along with Chuck, but it was not so. And you get into design and production, your animators, and background and all that, and obviously voice actors, right? Such a key instrumental piece on this is the voice actors. And Boris Karloff, like, they knew exactly who they wanted. Both him and Ted were like simpatico on that. They knew who they wanted. There was one guy, and it was Boris.
Yeah, he was, I think about it, Boris Karloff was born in the late 1880s. So, he was, quite a bit older than everybody else involved in the production. And he was already legendary. He started acting in 1919 when Chuck was 6 or 7 years old. So, all of those credits that he had during his lifetime, leading up to the 1960s. And this was one of his last productions. He passed away in 1969. And so, he did this recording in 1966. So there was, yes, he continued to do some films that were released and whatnot, but this was one of his last things. And he was the legend. He was, it's almost like, getting the voice for Star Wars for Darth Vader. Everybody knew that it had to be something that big and that daunting. That was the equivalent. He was the voice and the villain. He had played villains for 50 years, basically, just about. And so, and he had that poetry about him. There is, in fact, I think there was a clip of Chuck talking about Boris Karloff. Scott, is there a clip of that? That I think that was what was in there. If I'm wrong, you can just say no.
Picture this special. This magnificent needs a very unique voice.
I'll show you how they did it, Joseph. I'll show you how they birthed them.
And with a voice like that, the main character in How the Grinch Stole Christmas sprung to life. Irritated and nasty and certainly quite frightening.
Boris Karloff was such a name, such a presence.
Many people associated him with the idea of being a Frankenstein's monster, the big guy. But then I realized that Boris Karloff was the only one who did these voices. I didn't want any other voice to come in because there's a poetic quality of the way he read it. And that curious little rhyming pattern that all Dr. Seuss things have is very catching.
He had the power of the voice. He could be malignant in what he said and the way he could say it.
Yeah, that says it better than I ever could. But I do remember Chuck talking about it, and he wasn't inexpensive at that point. And they flew him over from England and obviously put him up here and did the recording in the studio and so, but it was those touches that really, I think, are important to understand Chuck's overall vision. And I think that's part of why it fits so well in the Creativeside Chat in this time, is that seeing Chuck and listening to his inspiration, all of a sudden he knew what could be, and he was relentless at getting it to happen. And so all these things are about overcoming obstacles, and I think that's what creativity is all about, is to figure out how to overcome obstacles. And Chuck personified that. So he wanted Boris Karloff. He sat with him. He knew what cadence he did, just like he did with June Foray. And although June only had one line in this, they had worked together for years and years. And as you know, June and I spent many days together at different events and different things about Chuck, and talk about an understated legend of June Foray. You know that she has over 400 credits on IMDb? Think about that, 400. And she started with Chuck in the 1950s. So, and really was the voice that he'd go to, anytime he needed a female voice. And she would, hey, there's me and June. That's such a great picture. That was, so much fun.
You know what I love about Chuck's statement on her is when they brought her in, she did Witch Hazel for 3 different studios, right? And gave her own inflection on each one. She had so many things, like you said, 400 credits. And I thought it was, Chuck mentions in his book that don't call her a voiceover, right? She is not voiceover. She is an actress. And what she pulls off, and the highest compliment he could give to Mel Blanc, and his out of deepest respect, is that he was a great male June Foray.
Yes, that is very true. So, yeah, and looking at these, looking at the character designs that Scott is putting up of Cindy Lou Who, and it's interesting that she does look a lot like June Foray. But I'll tell you what, she was really patterned after my sister Valerie. And so, my sister Valerie was 2 years old at the time of this production, had the blonde hair, had the blue eyes, didn't, I don't think, had the antenna at that point, but everything else, the pink nightgown and the whole thing, really patterned after it. And I think we all knew that was the case, and Chuck was open about that he sort of patterned it after, and it used to annoy the heck out of my brother and me. You know, I do remember sitting in front of the television and looking for characters like, well, no, that who is me, that who is me, that one is me, and it really wasn't true, but that's okay.
That's all right. You know what? In all, yes, I do have a sketch though from Chuck in his sketchbook, and there you and your brother are in the little corner. In Chuck's sketchbook. You know, so as we get into the voice actors and you're doing your recordings and you're starting in on production and pre-production and expanding the story from 12 to 23, 24 minutes, I thought, and we have a clip from this, and we're just going to roll Chuck's words as they got into production. Scott, can you play TNT 1, please?
If you read the book, you'll find that runs about 12 minutes. And so we had to extend it. We had to, but it was all added. It was not part of the book.
So funny enough, right? The dog Max is, as Chuck says, it was patterned after his father's fox terrier that he tried and failed to train. So there you go. Family dog makes it into a film.
Very, very true. You know, very different look than Max in the book. A lot of similarities, but he certainly took that pattern in the way that, you know, he kind of came down to a point and whatnot. But the, you know, fleshing out this into, because it's not just the reading, it's obviously the action that goes along with it, and fleshing out Cindy Lou Who more into that relationship, and watching her evolve within the story. And Max was the biggest part of it, because he really is the comic relief throughout the whole thing. But then there's also the songs, and so, you know, that it had to be a musical. You know, you don't have a musical book, and obviously there was already the singing that would happen in the book as they sing, and the you know, at the very end and whatnot. But the idea that they needed to create more songs, and so they brought in Albert Haig, you know, to compose this new thing. And as he says, you know, well, I think we actually have a clip of him talking about what he did, but he was the perfect choice of that.
So Scott, let's go to TNT 4.
Trim up the tree with Christmas stuff like bingle bees and hofer fluff. I think it's the first time that somebody wrote a Christmas polka.
Albert Haig is a Tony Award-winning composer, and for The Grinch, he wrote all 3 songs.
I've had the privilege of working with some of the really finest lyric writers in the English-speaking world, and you develop a sense when something really jumps at you. And when you hear "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch," and then comes the analogy, how mean, you know, and you've got termites in your smile. I mean, that's just totally irresistible. And Seuss is just full of those lyrics, and those images are just incredible.
Well, and you know, so Albert Haig was not already, you know, that evolved. He was much younger than the others, and already quite accomplished, but he wasn't that legendary yet that he became later. But Chuck, because they needed a singer, and Thurl Ravenscroft, actually Chuck knew Thurl Ravenscroft. It goes all the way back again to A Night Watchman, which is, he's not even credited in it, but Thurl Ravenscroft actually sang on A Night Watchman, Chuck's first directorial film in 1938. So, you know, and he went into the war. He was in the service, and we got to know Thurl very well in the 90s. But he had that baritone voice that he sang on that first one. You'll know Thurl. Everybody will know Thurl because he was Tony the Tiger. Mm-hmm. Those who live down here in Southern California, he was the voice of the Pageant of the Masters, which is a summer presentation of fine art at a festival, and he was the announcer for years and years. So He was the perfect one. And I never heard Chuck talk about how, or Don Foster, who did the credits, or anybody else, how it is that Thurl Ravenscroft didn't get credits in the film. Nobody knows. But when it came out, there was a lot of publicity about Thurl, and there's Thurl working with the band, and you can, so he was a big man. He had to be 6'6". So he was a huge, just baritone booming, most gentle man you'd ever met, but the sweetest, but he had that big voice. And so it complemented, but those songs and the animation that goes along with it, and those were new songs written. There are notes in one of the books, which I just couldn't find for today, but maybe we've got images of it, of the song lyrics in some of these books that were written. And there was some extra dialogue that were changed, some by Chuck, some by Dr. Seuss. But it was definitely that project that came together, that in like you said, to flesh out to something. I don't know about you, it didn't take me 12 minutes to read that book.
No,
you know, more like an 8-minute, but I guess I'm not delivering it like Boris Karloff. So
no, and you know, I had too, what I wanted to let people know also is Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, or if you're here with us, joining us on Zoom, if you do have questions, please do pop them in the chat. I'll be able to see some of that stuff, and then we have others that we'll see on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and then I can ask those for Craig as we go from moment to moment in the production. And we do have a question, was why did they decide to make the lyrics of the song Fahu Faraze to imitate classical Latin?
Well, obviously it wasn't Latin, and from what I understand, it was the you know, I mean, it's the Whoville, first of all, so you've got to get who in there. You know, Fahu Dore, you got all the rhymes as Dr. Seuss, but that specific one, I mean, think about what Chuck did with all of the Latin in the Roadrunner Coyotes. You know, when the Roadrunner comes up and stops, and you get the Latin underneath, and it's all made up and whatnot. So there was a long history of making up Latin. I don't speak Latin, so it could be real Latin as far as I know.
Well, you know what I found interesting is when they were going through and writing and producing the film, and they were getting into the script part of it, it was, how do you do a Christmas film without doing Santa and all the traditional necessarily Christmas stuff that you're including? Obviously, you know, Grinch is dressed up as Santa, but you're not using Santa. And then even in the Christmas carols, you're not using traditional Christmas carols. So I think what, you know, they had mentioned, they start making up, we're going to make up our own Christmas carols, and we're going to write our own thing. And now, guess what? It's a Christmas carol that you invented.
Yeah.
As we've got some, like, I love the production art from this, and Scott's got it showing right now on the split screen. And we also have some fantastic pencil tests. And then Craig, I am dying.
So yeah,
unwrapping some boxes.
Let's do this. Before we get to the pencil test, because we talked about all the people, but there are parts that go into it. I think that might be a good way to sort of target some of what I've brought out. So, but the box that's sitting there that I'm going to go get up and go open right now, which you can, that one. I'll leave this, and you can either spotlight just that, because I won't be on there, because I need to actually stand up to do all this good stuff. So
go ahead.
This is a random box. So, and it basically says stuff, you know, How the Grinch Stole Christmas stuff. And
is it like that TV show where the guys buy like storage units, and they have no idea what's inside, and all of a sudden you pop it open and holy crap, look at what's inside?
Yeah, I don't know if that's as legitimate as this is, but here we go. I'm gonna just see. Okay, so yeah, I didn't even know what's okay. So these, on the most delicate tissue paper, and I'm sorry if there's a horrible glare. I did my best to
no,
not do that.
It looks good.
These are on tissue paper, and these are things done by Maurice Noble for color comping, for overlays on backgrounds to make sure that the color schemes are going to work. And but you know, they were taken, the designs were taken from Chuck layout drawings, but these are actually, I don't know if you can see how translucent that is, but and then I'm just going to do my buggerest best not to hurt anything. Let's get that out of the way.
Craig, as you're unboxing and showing these two, what I wanted to mention is we've got on chuckjonescatalog.com, there is an entire, right at the top, links are all at the top as you hit chuckjonescatalog.com, one of a kind, one of ones from the Grinch, a lot of limiteds on stuff that people haven't seen before, and we'll get into the specials too that are offered on some of this exclusive artwork. But what is that?
That is a Maurice Noble layout. That is so cool. That's at the end, obviously, with the presents.
Yes.
And then, you know, throwing that. So the notes, the key from color taken from original film, use bright reds. I mean, there's a lot of communication going on in there. So, I mean, this is classic Maurice. Maurice did some limited edition backgrounds for us, and this is how he'd work. Just make sure that everything had its place, the color scheme was right. I mean, this is the whole production design. This is, oh, that's cool.
Are these actual drawings?
No, these are the storyboard stats that were given to the animators. So these were actually ones that were up with the animators when they were animating, so that they were taken up from compilation of Chuck's actual drawings. But I'm just going to take a look and see what the heck is in here. So, oh, that's random. So yeah, they would get a stat. He would compile drawings so that there were certain poses about the character drawings. Oh, these are cool. So you can see, yeah, taken from his original drawings. And the way that the stats are made is that there's a negative made first. These are all original stuff done for the production. That's pretty awesome. Wow. That's part of history.
I love the negatives.
I know. I know. Well, I'm looking at this one. I mean, look at the who's.
You know what I love too is it captures. I love Chuck's lines. You know, just in his, which is what I love about his sketches, and that's the biggest thing I've got from him as the sketches. I love that raw line, and man, that comes through just as clear in that negative.
So this looks like it's all been blacked out, so that it didn't, because they were the cut marks before, so they were blacked out, so they didn't transfer to the white. So just again, part of the process back then during that time frame. So I'm going to have some work to do to put it all back together, but what the heck. And then,
yeah, what?
Random. So that I'm going to. Oh, that was what that was in. So. Hey, like that. That's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Just a random original production cell in this, sitting in this random box.
So next time I'm out there, can we just go random box opening?
Well, you know, you had mentioned that before about being able to go and see some of the boxes and things like that. You know, the reason that Ben, although I love him dearly, he's a board member for the Chuck Jones Center for Creativity, so he gets special privileges, I will say. There is that. So this says that it's made for that 1996 30th anniversary event that we had. So that was obviously a title card of sorts. But let me see if there's anything else of interest, more storyboard things. I don't know. I'm not going to go forever. Oh, look, there's some snowflakes. Can you see that?
I can barely see them, but they're there.
Okay. Yeah, there's just some snowflakes sitting in there. I don't want to, I'm going to make a mess, and people don't like it when I make a mess. So I'm going to put some of these back, and then we'll go do something else. But these are kind of, so like I said, random stuff. And I like random. All right, here we go. So let me pull this out of here.
Speaking of, while you're going after another box of deliciousness, what I wanted to, you bring in the process of, again, I love Chuck's inks. I love the lines. Like, there's just so much character to those. It's something that I, love just staring at. And to get those lines correct and to be able to translate that, let's talk about xerography as you're pulling out cells, and we've got these things, and you can clearly see that line in those, like Chuck's characteristics in this film. How did xerography, if I have
Yep, the Xerox process
impact in this?
So I mean, it really started. Don the Line made it very, and it was new at that point. Obviously, before then, things were hand inked. From the animation drawings, but in this case, and we'll get to the animation drawings and see some of the cells, how that transfers. But it retained, because you got the animator's drawing instead of an interpretation of the animator's drawing. They got to do things a lot. Oh yeah, this is talking of, I'm going back to Maurice quickly. So this is,
look at that.
That actually looks more like Chuck, because it's way more loose than Maurice would do. And that's definitely Chuck.
Oh
yeah,
it's like his contraptions, when he does his doodles.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's got so many things going on, and this is a layout drawing. So this is actually given to the animator, and you can see the 8 down in the corner. And so, but this is a Chuck layout drawing that is, so that's just a copy of it. But
yeah, that's awesome.
Is that just awesome? So and that's scene 8. They've actually done it so that I can know what scene it is. So
we had a while you're opening that up. Oh no, that's a perfect segue into the question I have. Just go ahead and open that, and let's stare for a second. So, question from Facebook: did Sue say that Chuck Jones' drawings of the Grinch looked a lot like Jones, and did Chuck have that in mind when he was drawing him?
Well, I don't think Chuck had in mind doing it, but he did obviously evolve the character from the book. And Scott, do you have a picture of the Grinch on either the cover of the book or somewhere in the book? If not, don't worry about it. But everybody can go to their shelf and pick up the How the Grinch Stole Christmas off their bookshelf. But it is that's more of yeah. So the original Grinch, this is Chuck's Grinch for the album, but that's okay. So we can go back to here. Chuck's Grinch did end up looking much more like Chuck. There's a publicity picture, Scott, that you showed before where it's Ted, Chuck, and a picture of the Grinch that was done in '66. If you want to spotlight that, Chuck's has his eyebrow raised in one of the black and white photographs that you did. You can kind of see this was the joke. And I may have seen it elsewhere. If you don't have it, Scott, don't worry about it. No, where he was staring at the camera, I think it was in TV Guide. There was just the 2 of them. If not, don't worry about it. So I may have seen it elsewhere. But anyway, so going back to this, yeah, this is a layout drawing for Chuck as he's looking down the mountain. And again, we're looking at some original layout things. So obviously Chuck was communicating what was going on behind in this one, and then blue lines should be Maurice's.
That's incredible.
But that's taken from, yeah. Those are more blue lines that are probably Maurice's or somebody that was working with Maurice. But that is a Chuck original, which is kind of crazy. So
as you're flipping through, you had mentioned, as we're looking at some original production animation drawings, you had mentioned, Phil Roman's big break.
Yeah, he came in the early '60s with Chuck and really cut his teeth. He wanted to be that master, and then he went on obviously to produce or work at Sopwith Productions on Peanuts, and then went off and started Film Roman and did incredible things over there. So these are things So what is this? This is Chuck's, but I think Maurice, storm clouds should gather during this scene. So Chuck's idea was having storm clouds behind the Grinch during this scene, but Maurice obviously didn't agree because there weren't. This is, how can I stop it from coming sort of situation. So,
oh,
look at that.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we have two. While you're opening that, Scott, would you mind going dual screen? And we've got some pencil tests as that we can show while Craig is opening the box of goodies.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's start with 0154, and then we'll kind of march down a little bit to 0353 also. But we've got some pencil tests that show the pencil work on the animation, and look at that.
That's Maurice's background layout, but it's actually twofold here. This is the left-hand side that he's going in when he's running away. And then it looks like, I think that was there. That's what the background looked like when it was done. So it was two-sided, and that's an actual cell sitting in there. That's kind of cool.
What I love about that, though, it goes to what Maurice would say about his design, right? Was he doesn't want it competing with the action. It has to be a complement, because if you're background over the action, then he's not doing his job right.
Yep. So that's pretty awesome. Let's see.
Let's go BG 96.
Look at that.
What?
Yeah. Look at that. Is that crazy? That's a cool. I love that scene. That's just a classic.
I like, well, the horn weighs him down and he saws a few off and it writes back up.
So this is not an original cell. This looks like it was hand inked for a different purpose, but because you can tell the Xerox thing. Oh,
that looks like
real. That, but it says scene 107 not used. So maybe they didn't get to that point for some reason. But look at the timing marks on this, and as far as positioning, I mean that's unbelievable.
Scott, let's go back to spotlighting Craig.
So that's a Chuck layout drawing. I mean, this is how he communicated what he wanted as far as eyebrows and scraggliness and furriness. And I think that was the coolest thing about what the animators did. They animated him shaggy. If you look a lot of the other animation drawings, they're being very clean. Oh, this is interesting. This is Chuck telling the camera person how to layer them. I've never seen that before.
I love the fact that he communicates visually.
Yeah, not in text, but so this is the scene that he's talking about with the rope and the snow cycle and the wow.
Yeah.
That.
So we have the director's notes right to the production animation itself, and here's how it all gets put together.
Look at that. I've never seen him do that before, but obviously he knew exactly what he wanted. Oh, this is going down the scene. This is a Ken Harris scene. Yeah, there's Chuck's layout drawing for this, going swooshing around that corner.
Oh, and that's like actual pencil on paper, correct?
These are all originals by Chuck. Yeah, this is wow. And he's how to animate the snow.
Just in case you were wondering, guys, I want small globs of snow to look like this.
And just the rough on the positioning. Obviously, it doesn't need a lot of detail, but it's at this moment, that's pretty cool. Ooh, and then Maurice's background layout for it. Ooh, that's just awesome. Yeah. Okay, I've only got a couple more of these, so I might as well just
we'll pop these, and then we'll get into like what.
Yeah. Well, this I one of the things that I saw on this time that we watched was that the detail in the small scenes, because you think about it, I mean, they had to animate those. The timing was perfect. The characters looked perfect, even though they were tiny. And it wasn't like you could make them, I mean, look at that. That's Maurice telling him, animate shadow in blue pencil. I mean, that's just down to, wow. Oh, wow. There's
Oh,
thing, and there's one of the cells that actually sits on it.
and you know what is amazing? You watch the film, and this piece right here reiterates every little detail that's produced to make this film.
You know, it's a 24th of a second, just one, and look how tiny they had to animate.
Yes.
To do that. I mean, that's crazy detail on that thing. That, wow, I love that. All right, what's 201? Come here.
So we're,
this is, here we go. I know that one.
To me.
Yeah. So this is where the tree in the middle is. So it's right in that scene at the end where he picks up his the tree and goes away, and then trots off through this. This is a cutout.
Mm.
So there is actually a cutout. I don't know if you can see the detail lifting. So it would sit and they'd animate under it. So that's pretty awesome. Fairly high key BG for silhouette. That's so awesome. Okay, so that was the Maurice sort of thing, how Chuck and Maurice, you know, you got layout drawings, you got background layouts. That's really the inception point for you know, before animation is done. And so, you know, you're talking about the dialogue has been recorded, the music has been recorded, as far as so that the timing is all right, so that they know all the sound beforehand, because that has to be all done down to the 24th of a second before any animation is done. So that's all in Chuck's head before he does that. So
which is amazing. And Scott, if you can show on the main sequence here while Craig and I are talking, you can go ahead with 0925 and roll through 1836. Go ahead and play those clips. We've got pencil tests to final animation, so you know, some amazing kind of side-by-sides and what that looks like, and some more of, you know, Chuck's notes, what that looks like when you get to the final piece. So much goes into this production. So when they talked about, you know, adding scenes, you know, and Chuck, when they added this scene specifically, you know, and this helped to lengthen the feature, but also they wanted Max to feel, you know, like that person, that basically that sympathetic figure that we could relate to, and that's what Max is.
And obviously he does that so very well. I mean, that's Chuck mastery of understanding the character. So
so as we go through and we see some of these things, again, I want to just bring up, we've got some amazing pieces at chuckjonescatalog.com. The Grinch is all loaded at the top, and I was drooling over some of what you have on that part of the site, which is available. And we can see here and some additional pieces. And what I found was an interesting note is that Chuck said that the Grinch changes a green, his green changes just a bit as his heart warms, right? And he goes from the Grinch before to the realization after of Whoville.
well, and obviously everybody recognizes that at that moment his eyes turn blue. Now, and I watched closely, he's got blue eyes here, but before that moment he's got red eyes, and he does kind of go back and forth between red and blue in that sequence after they chase the sleigh up. And I believe there's some continuity checking that's going on there, but you know, if we look at, let me pull out an actual cell since we're talking about it. If I have one here, well, I don't have any. Oh, bugger. Was there a Grinch? No. Well, let me see if I can find one as we go through. So maybe there's a blue-eyed Grinch over here. I'm going to walk by on this side.
All right, you walk on that. What I wanted to show too is, go ahead and Scott, if you can roll The other pencil test, as we kind of get into that, which was more on the pencil test 4. We go pencil test 4 and 5, and so we can see that as Craig's pulling out some pieces. Yeah. Hello. I love watching this stuff. Yeah, Craig, keep that up because we're going to come back to your view of what you have framed there in a second.
Yep, just a second. I'm going to get there.
So we go from production, everything's wrapped, it hits TV, and it becomes an acclaimed success pretty much right off the start, which had to make Chuck and Dr. Seuss feel pretty darn good.
So looking at the pencil test here, thing is it came through on story and on, with voice and stuff like that, but he wasn't there for the animation, and he wasn't there for all of the deeds that he did. That they watched the pencil test, got through the whole thing, and Dr. Seuss, as the questioner alluded to, turned to Chuck and he said, "Chuck, that doesn't look like my Grinch. That looks like you." And at that point, it was sort of that acknowledgement of, oh, I guess maybe it does a little bit. So that became the joke after that. But he didn't, he was so not involved in that part that at the beginning, that he was like, this is not going to be exactly like my book. It's, a collaboration between the two. But since I've got this here, I will show you in this one again. So if you can, and this is not a perfect science, but you can see the red on his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you take a look, Scott, do you have a production drawing there of the Grinch? I've got one right here. Hold on. So this is a production drawing. And by the way, this is the 54th anniversary setup that is being available for these drawings. So, but if you take a look and you see how the eyes are black, and there's a lot of animation out there where the eyes are hollow on a hand inked one.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing here is that when you use Xerox, because they're not hand inked, that black eye is going to transfer over. And so that then goes over. The paint on a cell goes on the backside of the cell. And if you paint the backside of a black eye, you don't get the color. So they had to go through, paint all the backs of them. And if Scott, if you want to go show the cell there for a second that you've got up. So the red eye is done on the front, whereas the paint for the rest of the cell is on the back. So they had to not only paint the front, they had to paint the back. I mean, the back of the cell, they had to paint the eyes on the Grinch through the whole production. And then they changed it blue with that at the end. I just wanted to show you this plaque that comes with it.
So that's if anybody purchases the production work, this is the setup. You get the plaque, you've got the screen grab with the time code, and the original piece comes framed just like you have it here. That's correct?
Yeah, that and Chuck left us notes about which animator did each scene. So you get to know what scene, what time code it was, and what animator was working on that. Oh, this is wow.
What is that?
These are model sheet sketches that obviously he made notes on for other purposes as well, but this is all MGM stuff. Look at those things. I mean, that's pretty awesome.
Is that on chuckjonescatalog.com?
Not yet, I guess.
Oh my goodness, look at that.
Yeah, this is another Maurice one that is there. That is a Chuck original sketch. Most of these things are all Chuck original, which is, ooh, there you go. Now you kind of know how the Grinch evolves through Chuck's personal drawings. I love the detail in like Grinch's face. That's all just graphite on MGM letterhead paper or animation paper. So
fair to say a good old Blackwing pencil.
Yeah. So, oh gosh, look at this. I love that. That looks like it's on standard paper. This obviously found something. I don't know exactly what.
Well,
why
that
it's
is
crumpled,
actually
but
from when Chuck, I can tell you exactly what that's from. It's a sketch of a guitarist made during the recordings of the music for How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
I just didn't know why it got so crinkled. You know, somehow it got, look at all of the crinkling.
Well, you know what? So that brings up a good segue as you're doing this. You know, obviously the film comes out, great success, a lot of accolades go with that, and you know, you get into life after production and what happens to all of this stuff, and Chuck's retention of his work after, you know, like how some of this stuff you almost didn't have. So how did that, the UCLA storage, you know, the broken water mains, all that kind of stuff, how is it that you were able to preserve what you did? Because what was the status quo in dealing with artwork post-production?
Well, as we're sitting there and we'll look at the drawings, I'll bring out some more animation drawings because that's sort of the next phase of everything there. The you know, all of the artwork, the drawings and the cells and the backgrounds and the layouts and everything, there were some that Chuck kept throughout the Looney Tunes times that he just thought were kind of cool, that you know, he's like, nah, those are things that I'd like to save. But really, after the production was done, if you think about it, at Warner Brothers, there were over 1,000 cartoons made in 30 plus years there. So by usually 3 different units pumping out between, you know, 10 and 12 a year. And so they made a huge byproduct of stuff. In the early days, they used to actually wash the cells off, and they'd wash the ink and they'd wash the paint. And that's how Chuck actually started in the industry, as a cell washer. And so, but then they just put them in storage and put them in storage and put them in storage. And then in the about 66 or 67, Chuck didn't know about it at the time. Warner Brothers, if they shut their studio down, they needed storage, and some have already heard this story, but there was, you know, byproducts from 1,000 cartoons with all of those animation pieces, and they needed storage for another department, and so they took them out in the parking lot and they burned them all. And so it is one of those still visceral things that kind of hurts me when I think about it. Not for Chuck was. He wasn't hurt by it. You know, when my mom found out about it, when she was looking to possibly start this animation world of selling in art galleries back in the 70s, and found out that story and told Chuck, thought he was going to be devastated. And he said, well, that's okay. I tell you what, I'm still here. I'll just draw. You create limited editions like Rembrandt, and we'll do them in the same style, and we'll go ahead and sell them that way. He just was sort of like, okay, well, that was byproduct. But at MGM, it was his Chuck Jones Productions that had them, even though he was an employee of MGM, and he kept a hold of them. And so, and because the studio certainly didn't want to pay for storage, no one wanted to pay for storage, and so he stored them all. And then they, in the 70s, he loaned them to UCLA Animation School, and great animation school. Chuck knew those folks really well. Thought it would be great to study How the Grinch Stole Christmas there at UCLA, and he could teach. He wanted to pass this along. And so he loaned them the production, and they could go in and look and whatnot. And unfortunately, well, it turned out to be the very end of their possession of them. Where they had them, they had a flood. And much of the production, unfortunately, got flooded and destroyed. I have a couple examples. I don't have them here, but if you can imagine a background piece of paper with paint all over it, soaking in a foot of water for a day, doesn't bode well, nor do animation drawings, nor do cells, nor do anything else that comes in contact with soaking water for a long period of time. So a significant portion of the production was damaged or destroyed during that. And so Chuck took them back, and so we then stored what was left over, and then added it to what we offered in the galleries starting in the 90s through permission and licensing through MGM, Warner Brothers, and Dr. Seuss Enterprises. And so that was how the few things that those cells and drawings that were there, and some of these things that Chuck kept just because he liked them at the time, and some of the things that were that remained. But and then the other thing that happened, and we still don't know exactly how many were done, but in 1990, I can probably pin the year, probably about 1998, I received at the office a package about this big, and it was about this thick, and in a kind of a manila type envelope with some cardboard in between. And I opened it up, and there was a letter that was printed, no name, no signature, no return address, no nothing. And all it said was, I was a student at UCLA Animation School in 19 whatever it was, and we were down in the archive and studying these things. And one of the people I was with said, no one's here. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. So we each took a scene and took it home. And this person said in their letter that it had eaten them alive from inside since the time they did it. They never did anything with it. They never sold anything, and they just wanted to get them back to the rightful owner. And I don't know how many scenes disappeared that way. There may be out there in the world somewhere, but somebody lightened their conscience a little bit by sending back a scene of drawings and cells to Chuck. And so who knows how much of the production walked away that way. But, you know, this production has been through hell and high water, I guess, literally. So there you go. How do you like that?
That was very good. I will give you the for you, sir. So you know, you've got some amazing pieces, obviously. Still, I love the box of goodies that you keep opening. We do have the 54 years of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and this kind of anniversary package, if you will, that you guys are framing with the plaque and who directed the scene, and the screenshot too of the film with the time code, and then the original piece. It looks gorgeous in the frame setting, and that's available to chuckjonescatalog.com. I love owning a piece of history in this, and specifically animation history, because there's something in a film, you know, and I've got stuff from different films that I've collected in the production art that just speaks, right? It made you feel something, and now you get to own a piece of that. What are you opening right now?
So this is an exhibition that we did of production drawings for the 50th anniversary. And so I thought, revisiting this, and we did it in a storyboard version with the dialogue here. So these are original production. Whoop, that one is definitely worth seeing. So a Cindy Lou Who. This is a sequence from all the scenes that we had some original drawings from, in sequence with the animator. So this is where a lot of the information comes from, what scene it is and what the dialogue is that's going on. So take a look at, I mean, this is like seeing the cartoon in original production drawing form of how the animators did it. And so you can see the detail. And when I sat with Chuck, and because my mom came up with the idea of one of one. So you take the drawings and you do a one of a kind limited edition that goes along with it. And this was all part of the licensing deal way back when. And so you'd have a reproduction of the cell and the original production drawing. And that when we started doing that, it was the first time that Chuck had really seen the drawings since the production. And he'd go, you know, wait, those are Benny drawings. Those are eyebrows, you know, and look at you're not going to find animation like this ever again. And he would just go through and talk about what each drawing would look like and who did it. I mean, Lloyd Vaughn worked with Chuck since the 50s, maybe even 40s. The Who's were awesome. I'm kind of doing every other one. Oh, I love that.
Go back one real quick. So I'm just going to give out a shout out to Ben Washam. There you go, Ben Washam. Here's another Ben Washam.
Oh, this one. Wait, where'd it
No,
go?
no, next one.
Yep.
So you know what's incredible about this is, and what's what I love about it, because I can go back to it, is you own an actual moment of time with these, which I absolutely love.
I mean, look at this is the thing. This is a drawing of just the eyes, and you can see the detail of that pencil on that paper and the texture and how much effort there is into there. So, so you were going to tell me a quick story about Ben Washam and Ben Washam?
I forgot what that story was.
I love seeing the name on there, so that's awesome. But
right? It was he's the grandson of Ben Washam. So we have Ben Washam, who is the grandson of Ben Washam. And there it is, the 24 Karat Award to Ben Washam. There you go, sir.
All right. Well, we'll have to connect, because that would be awesome to meet another grandchild of someone great like that. So
yeah, he reached out on Instagram, because we're follow each other on Instagram, and made the comment a couple days ago.
So I'm gonna try here. Maybe I'll do this, and then you can see both. I wonder if I can. No, can't do that. I am taking more time than I'm supposed to, but I think it's worthy if you guys are okay with it. There we are. How's that? Okay, now you can see two at once. I always like that. All right, here we go. Ooh, there's the antler scene. How do you like that?
Love that.
That's Tom Ray. Tom Ray came back and worked at the Chuck Jones Film Productions for a while on Superior Duck. He was out and about for a long time. This is Ken Harris scene. You know, if you look at the scene, really this scene took so long, and Ken, it was like, I don't know, 16 different scenes that he did. And you think of the detail. Ken was always the guy who Chuck would ask to do the dance sequences in the Looney Tunes, because he just understood movement so well. And so, yeah. But remember that Ben Washam, Benny, well, one cool thing, and I don't know if there's any, Bob's Big Boy was created by your grandfather, and right next to the studio. And so he did the designs of Bob's Big Boy. And I still tell you, every time I go up there, I got to go to Bob's Big Boy, and I think of your grandfather when I go up there. So, but Ken Harris would do all the dance scenes. Here's Dick Thompson, who was married to Oral Thompson, who did all the ink and paint. Got to know Oral Thompson because she just passed away in, I think, 2014. And she actually, Oral, head of ink and paint. Do you have a picture of Oral Thompson there, Scott, with the Grinch? With the statuette? Maybe not. Oh, there she is. So if you can spotlight that for a second, there she is. So I got to know Oral over the last, I don't know, 20 years before she passed away. And she actually worked on Tron, the movie, the first one in 1982. And I geeked out because I was at UCLA that year, and I changed from pre-med to computer engineering because of that movie. And she worked on it. So talk about a cool thing. And she sent me, before she passed away, she sent me a mug that she had from the production of Tron. So a coffee mug. So that's one of my cool stories.
Oh, that's an extremely cool story.
Detail. Look at these dang drawings. Dick Thompson and the assistant on there. Let me get on this side. Up the tree, up the tree. Love that. There's more Ben Washam. Look at this stuff. Look at the detail in there. That's just nuts. I mean, that is just unbelievable detail. That Chuck was right. There is no animation like this. This was kind of that crescendo for all these guys and gals that worked together, because they had the time to do it right. Even on Horton Hears a Who, there was a lot of things that were taken away from Chuck and the team on Horton Hears a Who. And because things, and I'll just kind of aside for a second, because it wasn't exactly like the book, Ted got more involved in Horton Hears a Who, which is the next film that came up. And he came back, and actually during the production, and because it was so good, Ted gave Chuck the rights to all of his books to do. And so Horton Hears a Who was next, but Ted came back and said, you know what, I want it more like the book. So I want the characters to be a lot like the book instead. And Chuck said, okay, do you want Horton to be like what's on page 4 or on page 9? And which way do you want his knee to bend? Do you want it to bend forward, or do you want it to bend backward? Because I can't do both. That just won't work for me. So, and in a book, you can have any different angle, and it can be, you know, different size and whatnot. But in animation, you've got to come up with the right anatomy. And so Chuck did obviously come to an agreement with Ted. It was much more like the book, but that was the last time. Chuck did the storyboard for Cat in the Hat, but then that was directed by somebody else, and they sort of decided that they would go do different things at that point. So love these drawings.
That's my favorite part, is the production drawings. So
Yeah.
this is
and each one of them is, you know, scene 243 by Dick Thompson, and Ken Harris as he, you know, has his epiphany up here. So that would have been the time where when he blinked, it went from red to blue, and love that scene.
So one more time too, as you're flipping through this, it's all part of this 54 years of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and what you guys do with the commemoration, what you showed, the screen grab and the time code, and then the production drawing.
Look what that says.
I don't know, what does that say?
What does it say? Can you see that?
No. Well,
I'll read it to you. It says, Grinch original production drawing signed by June Foray and Phil Roman. What? I guess this is a scene that Phil worked on. He recognized it. Wow. They did a show together back in like the early 2000s. Jeez.
Yeah. That's
okay.
awesome.
That's pretty cool. Huh. It's amazing what people hide from me.
You're like, look at what surprises lie in this box.
Ooh. Yeah. Wow. Those are pretty awesome.
I love it. You have fantastic white gloves also.
What's that?
I said those are fantastic white gloves also.
I know. Well, you know, it's my closest impersonation of Bugs Bunny. But I have too many fingers. So I just thought I'd bring out some final type setups. So I don't think this is original production, but this is over a hand-painted background that was to match the original background. It may have been damaged, but that's an original production cell, which is just so cool. And see, I would have gone, that's me.
Yes.
You Todd, for
yes,
sure.
It is. That is you.
Let's
go with that.
There's that. And more Who's. Wait, there was one that I saw earlier. Where did it go? Oh, there. Oh, that was the one. Okay.
I love, that's probably my favorite one of the production cells.
This one here?
Yeah. Yeah. Just the character in that sack with him. And
I know. Yeah, when he comes down and well, yeah, tell you what, there's a couple of moments that are key to me. By the way, when he's sitting on the sewing machine and his tail comes through.
Yes.
It hurts. It hurts me for some reason. I'd be like, seriously, you're putting the dog tail through there? That's something wrong.
And the dog's just like, whatever.
And then he's like, oh, what? I just, ended up here. And then
Scott, take that. Scott, go ahead and take what you got. There you go.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, this one. Oh, you had the pencil test for this. This is you.
Yep. Nope. No, thank you.
I love what? The other moments, when he gets his epiphany and he's listening for the, he's like, is a sound I simply must hear.
Yes.
And it's that delicious moment where it's the anticipation, and although you've seen it 100,000 times, you're like, it's like in mouse wreckers where there's that moment where you're waiting for it.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Where I'm just, then he's like, well, wait a minute. And I do that at times where I make an assumption on things, and then I'm like, what am I missing? And that's usually when the inspiration or the revelation or whatever happens in that moment. So I love that. It's the pause of what am I missing that really leads to his epiphany. So
well, he's got that from like I love the moments too, like the little moments, even when, you know, they're running down the hill and the dog just looks at the screen, like looking right at you.
Yeah, well, you know, those breaking those walls is a huge part of it. And so, you know, I don't know if they've shown, yeah, I think these are some of the original things. There's things like the script, that's a copy of the script, but it's got some notes on it and whatnot. Genie with the light brown or the light green Grinch. That I don't know. But then you were talking about the success of it, and you know how successful. They didn't think it. Usually productions were like one and done, you know, and that's what they were billing for, and that's what they were expecting. And all of a sudden, it became an event because of who was involved. And Chuck, fortunately, had a clipping service. So some of these things are so incredible. I have looked through some of these. There's always something that I haven't seen. But there's that photo of Earl Thompson with the Grinch. That was for the Hollywood parade. But this is the actual the San Diego Union. And so I don't know. I like reproductions because they're easier to look at, but sometimes you just got to actually.
You're just going to feel it right out.
Well, it's in an archive and it'll go right back in the archive folder. So, but you know what? No one's ever seen this for probably 30, 40 years. So I figure we might as well do it. What do you think? Is that okay?
Look at that.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is.
If it's okay with you, it's okay with me.
Hometown of Dr. Seuss. So obviously front page. There's Dr. Seuss, the Grinch, the weekly schedule. You know, this is how people found out what was coming on television. And so, you know, you didn't just Google what's on TV.
Look at that.
Look at that. An inch in time makes a perfect size 9.
For $1. And you know what? I'm a size like 10.5, but I'll bet you I could slim down to that 9.
That is awesome. And your choice, $5 per 95 square yards. $5 for 95 square yards of drapery.
I could carpet my roof.
That is just awesome. I'm just looking at what's on. So Sunday, December 18th. Look at it, Mormon Tabernacle Choir on Channel 5. The movie, The Come On. Look at that, Porky Pig on Channel 6.
See how it all comes full circle?
It does. That's awesome. That should be, there you go. You got Porky Pig on Sunday morning. So
Sunday mornings.
Yep.
You know, as we bring this to a head.
Yep.
And first of all, thank you so much for bringing all this out. And I want to remind everybody again, ChuckJonesCatalog.com, one of a kinds. Like, you get the one thing, and then how you guys are producing it in the frame with the screen grab and the time code. There's some amazing production art there on ChuckJonesCatalog.com. The entire page is top loaded for Grinch, and I want to thank you. Because you've always been so kind and sharing, and just always looking to bless everybody else with everything that you guys have, you know, and to take us through this chapter in your grandfather's life of producing something that's legendary, and everybody has some sort of good feel too, right? This is especially at times like now and what we're all going through, it's good to have something nostalgic, right? That's a feel good that makes you feel good. And this is definitely it. And you and your family have been so kind and generous with all of this stuff. And I can't thank you enough for allowing me to take part and sit in and watch you open boxes of stuff that makes me drool. And you don't have to worry about me because I'm in Chicago and I can't get anything on the actual pieces.
Well, you know what? I think your observation is accurate. That you know, it started with Chuck. I mean, he was the guy who, and I never met anybody who was more giving of his time, of his talent. You know, he would say yes to just about anything. I mean, you know, as I've told the story, you know, he go lecture in kids' classes that were, you know, 6 to 12, 14 years old, whatever, and they'd all want to draw, and he said, just write me a letter. And he always send them a drawing. I mean, if they would take that time, they would do that. And so, but he was giving of his time to the people that he mentored. He was giving of his time and talents on projects like the Christmas Carol. And, you know, he always wanted to better the art. And so, you know, for Chuck, the animation was the art. He was on an interview not too, you know, well, probably in the 70s. And, you know, the guy's like, well, so, you know, these are cartoons. They're, well, what do you call them? And he said, art. Exactly for him, they're an art form. And so when my mother was approached and then had the idea that maybe there was something to do here to service a desire, that it became an adoption agency. And really, you know, it's now been 17 years that I've sort of taken over the head of that adoption agency. And the idea is to find works of art wherever they are, if they're in someone's attic or someone's archive box or in their heart that they're needing to draw or paint or to get out of them, and get them to the home of the people who love them. And so, you know, it's not just finding a home, it's finding the right home. And so, you know, it's always that. And Chuck was very, and if people ask, well, why don't you just hold on to them? And the idea was, and there are things that we hold on to for museum exhibitions because we do want to share them with the world. But the idea that Chuck and my mother, Linda, had is that what good will they do in a box in the warehouse? It brings much more joy to people to have them in homes who love them. And that's the whole point of the business. And so, you know, it's a passion for all of us to find the right adoptive parents for each one of these works of art. So Ben, I appreciate you, you know, wrangling the cat today, because it could have gone any which way, but you kept me on track, and I appreciate that. And I'm still Boris Karloffing over here. I just love that. There's something about that. And so these were actually just at a quick, there was a request for a Grinch oil painting, never done a Grinch oil painting. And so in 1992, he did 2 of them for limited editions. And so these are 2 of the limited editions that are long past, you know, we don't publish their artwork anymore, but we do have certain samples that that we've had or that other people have had, that these are examples of that. So that was how they came about, and he loved doing it. He was like, that was fun to revisit those characters after all those years. So they're the first 2 canvases that he did of the Grinch. And I actually have one of these on my mantle now because it's Christmas time and I rotate artwork, obviously. And I've got one of those in the family room. So it feels like I'm with family. There you go.
Well, I appreciate it. This is, I hope we get to do this again. I'm sure there's plenty more we can do with Grinch. And there's several other films that I have a phone call into you later on to be like, could we do this with this film?
Oh, okay.
So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, joining us here on Zoom, and being a part of this, how the making of a Grinch wasn't quite a cinch, and getting to see some really amazing things. We hope to see you next time for our Chuck Jones Creativeside Chat. Please do visit chuckjonescatalog.com. You can see amazing works of art that you can own yourself and own a piece of history, and some wonderful setups that the good folks at Chuck Jones Galleries are providing. So with that, I want to say Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, have a wonderful Christmas season, everybody, and we will see you again next time.
Hey, Ben, you want to unmute everybody? Have Scott Ryder unmute everybody.
Scott Ryder, can you unmute everybody and we'll give the big bye?
I'm gonna do the grid view so that I can see everybody. And if you'll come right to the top if you put your camera on. I'd love to see. I see Kim Graham. Hi. Hey, I'm seeing faces. This is great. It's almost like Homestead time. Everybody come live with me. Hey, Mike. Hi, Greg. Hey, Jim. Hey, Judy. This is great. Thank you guys for coming to visit, and hopefully you saw some stuff. I didn't get through all the boxes, so we're gonna have to do it again sometime.
Oh, darn.
Yeah, I know. Well.
Oh, darn. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great evening and have a
Thank
good
you.
week.
Thank you.
The little guy.
Greg, that's great. I love that picture. Oh my. Joanne, it'd be great to see your face. Great to see your picture. Ken, Ben, nice to meet you.
Yes, you too. I'm going to reach out to you.
I would love that. Yeah, I'm Craig at chuckjones.com. Just
Will do.
Later, guys.
Megan, that's awesome.
Thank you.